Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. On behalf of the Lubin Dean's Office and the Center for Student Enterprise, we welcome you to our Executive in Residence event today. We have a wonderful speaker. I've talked to him before, and he's very engaging, and I know that you will enjoy it. This program has been happening for 30 years now, so you're part of a tradition that's going, as Professor Kernet is applauding. That is something to applaud for sure. We've brought a lot of different executives to this campus, and it's been wonderful. Our Center for Student Enterprise that coordinates 5 businesses on campus, run by students, is really happy to be a co-sponsor. Some of the managers are here in the front row, our senior managers with the businesses. 2 of them are going to help me introduce our speaker and our dean, and I'm going to turn the program over to them now, and it's wonderful to see one students in the audience.
Hi, I'm Hannah Wiley and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of PacePack, one of our student-run businesses on campus. Today we have a very special executive with us. Scott Schulman has spent his career in the information and media industries as a leader of global businesses and as a consultant and advisor to many of the world's most successful and innovative companies. Mr. Schulman currently serves as an executive chairman and a board member at a private equity-backed business, data and analytics business. He also serves on the board at Marketplace Events, the largest consumer events business in North America. He is a senior advisor at the Boston Consulting Group, where he works with the technology and media practice and is also an executive coach for BCG client executives. He also has his own advisory practice, Blue Pine Growth, where he helps PE firms and private smaller businesses with growth strategies. Mr. Schulman recently served as CEO of UBM Americans, where he led the growth transformation of large events and information businesses. Earlier, Mr. Schulman served as a president of Rodale, a media company focused on health and wellness, with digital magazines, books, and other properties. Before that, he spent 13 years at Dow Jones and Company, with various leadership roles, including president of digital businesses, chief strategy officer, and head of global sales and marketing for the Wall Street Journal. He also served as a partner at management consulting firm Booz Allen Hamilton. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree from Duke University and MBA from Harvard Law School.
Morning, guys. My name is Matt Rice. I'm the Senior Purchasing Manager at Pleasantivlle Cafe. I'm also on the lacrosse team here at Pace. So in addition to having Mr. Schulman with us today, we're delighted that Lubin's Dean, Lawrence G. Singleton, will be interviewing him. Prior to becoming the Dean of Lubin, Dr. Singleton was previously Dean and Professor of Accounting and International Business in the School of Management at Marist College in New York. Prior to his role at Marist, Dean Singleton was a faculty member at George Washington University's School of Business, where he held many leadership positions, including Associate Dean for undergraduate programs. The scope of Dean Singleton's leadership spans a wide spectrum. He is also the founder of Singleton Associates, LLC, which provides consulting and training services to professional service firms, corporations, not-for-profit organizations, and government agencies. Dr. Singleton, a certified public accountant and chartered global management accountant, received his PhD, MS, and BS degrees in accounting from Louisiana State University. Dean Singleton will be interviewing with Mr. Schulman momentarily. I would like to announce that we have guests joining us via Zoom. So if you're joining us through Zoom and have a question that you'd like to ask Mr. Schulman during the Q&A segment of the program, please place your question in the chat box and the moderator will ask your question on your behalf. So without further delay, let's welcome Dean Singleton and our Executive in Residence, Scott Schulman.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the kind introductions for both of us. And welcome, Mr. Schulman. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Really
Great
appreciate
to be here.
this. I'm going to ask several questions for you to respond to, kind of share with the audience your vast experience that you have in the media industry. And then we'll have a chance for students to ask a few questions before we wrap up, okay? The first one is that you've been working in the information media industries for many years. What attracted you to these industries, and how has your career evolved?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I spent a lot of time exploring. I thought for a while maybe I'd go into medicine. In fact, my mother was a teacher, my dad was in the health fields. I thought, oh, maybe I'll be a pediatrician. And as part of my exploration, I was able to do volunteer work at Duke Hospital to see how it would go. I thought I'd build a little bit on my resume to, if I was going that route career-wise. And I came to this realization, I hate hospitals. I don't like being around sick people all day. So I scratched that one. And I spent a lot of time just taking different classes in different areas. I was very interested personally in consuming media. I liked reading, I liked watching TV, I liked listening to music. I started getting involved in campus media, like the cable television network and the radio station on campus, and writing for one of the magazines. And then started taking some classes, starting really with marketing and advertising classes, which I just thought were very interesting. And then didn't know anything about business, didn't realize that was the path I was on. But as I took some more classes, took a little accounting, took a little of other business-related classes, I realized if I could combine a lot of my personal interests and passions in media and information with a career, that might be a really interesting way to go. And that's really how it evolved, where I realized, let's do something I enjoy, I know a little bit about personally, and I wasn't going to be an actor or a movie star or a rock singer. So I said to myself, well, let's see if I can do something on the business side of all those worlds.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, the terms information, media, other names like that are thrown around a lot. What do those terms really mean to you? And what kind of changes have you seen?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start, because media and information mean, or could mean, a lot of things. And I think that's evolved a lot over the years. So let me put it into a few different buckets. There's what I would call traditional media, which, the definition, I think, is all kinds of businesses involved in distributing content and commercial opportunities to an audience, whether it's a consumer audience or a business audience. So traditional advertising-based media would be newspapers, magazines, broadcast television, cable networks, radio, outdoor advertising, all kinds of vehicles like that. Then some people include the entertainment industry as part of that. In fact, my old consulting practice, we did include entertainment. Entertainment typically paid for by the end user as opposed to through advertising. So this could be anything from movies. I'd put books in this category, video games, theme parks, and so forth. Then another bucket I would put as communications, which would include things like advertising, marketing services, social media, and so forth. And then lastly, and I put this in my definition, in fact, it's been a big part of my career, is what I would call business information, which is all kinds of products and information that companies buy to help companies make decisions and help people in those companies do their jobs. So I like a pretty broad definition, and of course, technology and digital has had a huge impact on all of this. So digital media, social media, and everything that goes with it has become a huge part of all the things I just talked about, and an enormous industry in itself. So when you talk about media and information, I like a pretty broad definition because it can include a whole range of industries and career directions across all the things I just talked about.
Very, very broad, it sounds like.
Yeah, pretty broad.
Really, really broad. Well, you've led a number of different types of businesses. What are some of the common themes and strategies that you have pursued in your different roles?
Yeah, so there's no question, across everything I've been doing, consulting, running businesses, advisory things, board roles, I'd say some of the topics and themes are actually pretty similar. So if you start pretty broadly, a lot of it has to do with how do you take advantage of technology changes. Technology to a lot of these businesses can be a big threat, and I'm sure we'll talk about that because there's been massive disruption to a lot of traditional media businesses because of technology. So one whole set of issues is coming up with new products, new services, using digital in some creative ways. So that's been one big theme. Another big theme has been going after what I call adjacent markets. So thinking about serving new customers, going after new geographies. So global strategies have been a big part of things I've been part of, and trying to solve problems for customers in new ways, whether it's consumers trying to consume content or get things done, or companies trying to make decisions. So really looking creatively at what customers are trying to do and thinking about how information products can serve those needs in some new ways. And I think that's part of what I've loved about this industry is there's always opportunity for new innovation and trying new products and doing new things in terms of not just product development, but how you market those products, how you sell them, what role advertising or sponsorship could play. And it's connected to just about every other part of our world. So, if you're interested in the health fields, or you're interested in energy or banking, or pick a topic, there are information products focused on those worlds.
Yeah.
So, a big part of my work has been, thinking about what can we do in terms of different types of content, data, to help people in, whether they're consumers or people working in different companies, solve those problems.
Yeah, interesting. Let's talk about some of the specific businesses you've led. For example, what were some of the decisions that you made when you led the group within the Wall Street Journal when the growth of the internet was just starting to have a big impact on traditional media?
Yeah, so that's a great example. So I was at Dow Jones, which owns the Wall Street Journal. And originally I was head of strategy, and then the big issue became, what do we do about the growth of the internet and all these other sources of information, many of which were free. So the Wall Street Journal's big product at that time, still a big product, was a newspaper, very successful, very authoritative, very well read, still is. But the biggest part of the business was a newspaper that companies advertised in or people subscribed to. When we went digital, the big question was, what do we do? And it was really some very visionary people that I worked with said, we believe, even though it's digital, we're going to follow the same basic business model, which is people who get value out of that content as readers, they're going to subscribe. They're going to pay and subscribe. And advertisers are still going to advertise because they want to reach those readers. This was a very controversial point of view at that time. Most of our peers, like the New York Times and many, many others, they were free. They felt, the internet is meant to just give away all your content for free. So we went a different route. And so the big question then was, okay, how do we not just protect our business, but how do we create some new businesses that are going to have other revenue streams attached? So the big themes there were creating a series of digital offerings that were the core Wall Street Journal. There was a subscription product, several free offerings that we thought would serve different parts of the market with some other kinds of content. Coming up with marketing strategies that convince people to use both. So keep reading the newspaper because that is something you know and love, and it probably serves a lot of value for you if you've been reading it. But you should also subscribe to the digital product because it helps you do other things. It helps you search the archives going back years. It helps you put your own stock portfolio together digitally if you want to do that.
Mhm.
So we focused on the value of both and building both. And it became, during the years that I was involved in leading it, it shifted from something that was small and pretty unprofitable to something that was pretty big and very profitable and is now a very important part of the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones. And all of our peers have followed that path now. So, the New York Times and everyone else, if they're producing high quality content, for the most part, they are charging subscription prices for it and selling advertising on top of it. So that business model has been very well established.
I remember when the first Apple iPad came out, and the Wall Street Journal put that, they had one of the first apps from the newspaper business. Very successful, right?
Yeah, very
They
successful.
led the way on that, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Look, another business you led recently was UBM Americas, which was at the time the largest business events company. How does that industry fit into media?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you might normally not think of events as part of the media and information world. And in fact, when I was asked to lead the largest events company in the Americas, I think I was chosen partly because I didn't come from the events industry per se. But let me just explain what kind of events we're talking about. These are giant conventions and trade shows and conferences that take place in places like Las Vegas, take over the Las Vegas Convention Center, tens of thousands of people sometimes attending, thousands of exhibitors putting booths out on the floor. The Javits Center in New York was another one of our big venues that we used, but we had venues all over the world, and we did hundreds of these big events. So basically, business people would come to network, learn about stuff, consume content if it was a conference, and then they would walk around an exhibit hall and see different products and services that their companies might want to buy. So this fits with media because it's another way of connecting people with information and commercial opportunities. The big focus that I had, well, there were several big things, but it was adding some other components to this marketplace kind of business, including digital offerings, including, we spearheaded something I called Beyond the Booth. Booth meaning like an exhibit that a sponsor might put in a giant convention hall. We added all kinds of services and models in addition to that, that could include content. We actually really grew training and paid conference opportunities for attendees when they came to these events. Many of them were free. You could walk around the exhibit hall if you were a qualified corporate person, but we added some paid services if you wanted to get trained in a certain field, if you wanted some education, if you wanted to learn some things. And we also did a lot to shift, again, I used the phrase adjacent markets before. We put a lot of focus on stretching and expanding some of the events we had to serve other markets. So I'll give you just one example. We had the biggest licensing expo, it was called, in Las Vegas. It's a giant event where the biggest brands in the world would come and be exhibitors. So companies like Disney or Hasbro or Nickelodeon, companies like that have all these brands, they would exhibit, and then thousands of attendees would come, and they usually came from companies that wanted to license those brands for different products or services. Maybe they were a toy company, maybe they produced bed sheets and they wanted the Nickelodeon characters on their bed sheets. So it was this giant event to connect those two worlds. And one of the things I saw was it was mostly around Hollywood, and that was a great place to focus on because Hollywood has a lot of brands. But the adjacent markets that we focused on and got a lot of growth was we thought about all kinds of other businesses that had brands that could be licensed beyond Hollywood. So we started getting into things like sports, got into things like video games that had brands. Even we had new areas like zoos. Some of the zoos actually wanted to brand some of their animals and some of their areas in their zoos broadly, because these were becoming characters in their own right. So we had companies like the San Diego Zoo suddenly came and exhibited at the event. Art, all kinds of other examples. But the point was, we stretched the core purpose of this event to go after all these other markets. And that involved a whole strategy of thinking about, how do you sell it? How do you market that? Do you need new content to attract to all these kinds of new customer segments? So it was a more holistic approach to say, how do we, in a concerted way, build and stretch this business in new directions? So that was one of the things I loved about the events world. It gave you this base for extending into all kinds of new market opportunities.
Very, very interesting, no question. I'm sure a lot of the students in the audience might be interested in a career in this industry. What are some of the big things they should know about, changes that you've seen, major changes they should be sure to be aware of and learn about?
Yeah, so, first of all, the big theme here, the big trend in everything I'm talking about is digital and technology, and the massive disruption that has taken place that has completely upended some of the economic models in the industry. So some of that first group of businesses I talked about, traditional media, TV, magazines, newspapers, and so on, dramatic change. And, we could probably don't have time to go into all the impacts, but basically what happened was, a lot of you are probably studying things like supply and demand and barriers to entry in the business world. But basically when the internet exploded, it created all kinds of new ways to distribute content. So a lot of the traditional business models got changed dramatically. There were all kinds of new options for people to consume information and for marketers to reach audiences. The good news is, from a career perspective, it creates all these new opportunities. So, I would say yes, traditional advertising is probably going to be challenged, but everything, digital advertising and digital media, digital marketing, social media, huge growth, and then all kinds of new products and services that are launching all the time, including huge ones that didn't exist just a few years ago, are a big part of this whole ecosystem. And I think that's what's pretty exciting about this world. Enormous companies that didn't exist a few years ago, Snap, Netflix, TikTok, we can go on, are now a huge part of this space. And from a career perspective, the New York area is a huge hub for so many really exciting companies and service companies that serve this whole world. So I think it's a great opportunity for Lubin and Pace because of where you're located and all the activity that's going on in this space. And it's an area where there's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial activity. There's a tremendous amount of career opportunities in different functions and fields. So if you're focused on accounting, if you're focused on marketing, if you're focused on technology, human resources, so many different functions can have a home in this world working for these kinds of companies. Then there's all the service companies, marketing, social media, accounting, consulting, legal, and so forth, that serve this industry, finance. So there's all of those kinds of opportunities. And also, I think it is an area where there's a lot of opportunity for people to create things, more entrepreneurial things.
Yeah. So for students who are currently in school, how should they best prepare themselves for this?
Yeah, so I think a few things. One is, I think it's great to do everything you can to learn and explore. So coming to sessions like this, go to other sessions like this, If you have the opportunity to meet with some people who were maybe PACE graduates or people who are new in their fields, to learn about what they do. You may decide you don't like it, but it may spark something that says, this is something that could be interesting. This is something I'd like to learn something about. I think some tools like LinkedIn can be very powerful. I went to Duke. I've had Duke students reach out to me to connect to me on LinkedIn with, they put their profile together, they reach out, they're not asking for anything, they want to just connect. I accept, because I feel, the connection as an alum, but I think, reaching out to Lubin and PACE grads who are in these fields, they're easy to find on LinkedIn. If you have a profile that showcases your interests and passions about this area, I think that's a great way to go. And then ultimately trying to see if you can have chats with people just to learn, just to hear what they're doing and understand, what it's about. What does it take to be successful in that area? So I think, at this point in your career exploration, learning and exploring is the best thing you can be doing. And, there are certain skills you can certainly pick up in all these areas I talked about. Technology, accounting, marketing, I think are all really important. But I think, at this point, it's thinking about what you might really love doing and then doing everything you can to just learn more about it.
And PACE is a great career center that can help connect you with alumni of the university and of the Lubin School as well.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question about the pandemic. As a media consultant, what's your take on the industry landscape now that things are winding down, the pandemic's winding down, and people are going to be consuming less media than they did during the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the pandemic created enormous growth for many information companies. And that was partly because people were sitting at home in front of screens more. So across all kinds of different sectors of digital information, consumer and business, there was actually enormous growth in the time people spent consuming this information and advertisers who wanted to reach those people. So a lot of companies did really well the past couple of years. The exception, you might guess, was my old events kind of business, which was all about bringing people together in rooms like this. That business shifted very hard towards virtual events and hybrid events and more digital. And there was huge growth in digital webinars and virtual events over the past couple of years. I think what's also interesting, another big trend is a lot of companies have kind of tapped into new ways of serving customers that may not have been thought about a couple of years ago. So some examples. You're probably familiar with companies like Peloton or Tonal that are basically in the fitness category. They sell hardware, but you can be a Peloton subscriber without buying the hardware. They are basically in the membership business around fitness. And a lot of companies are using technology. So Tonal and Peloton, they're using sensors, AI, and membership models to connect consumers to their platforms. And then a lot of other apps and services, in health and wellness, there are things like Noom, which is nutrition, stuff like Headspace, which is mental health and meditation and things like that, which is growing like crazy. So a lot of companies like this have recognized digital is something people are more and more comfortable doing new things with. Companies like Zoom, which of course exploded the past year. I went to a session with the head of Zoom recently, and he was talking about how are they going to grow, and he said, well, down the road, there's going to be a digital component to a lot of things where there wasn't a digital component before. Going to a funeral, going to a wedding, going to an event, going to a meeting. So there's a lot of new growth opportunity where I think the pandemic has kind of opened people up to what digital can do. But at the same time, I think people do like face-to-face interactions. I think the event business is going to come back. I think theme parks are going to come back. I think motion pictures are going to come back. Maybe not to where they were before in all cases, but I think there's been this explosion of opportunity, and the pandemic has forced a lot of companies to think about new ways of running their businesses and serving their customers and selling to those customers than before.
Post-pandemic, what's it, could we talk just a little bit deeper into that? What's it going to look like in terms of the mix of in-person, hybrid, all those kind of things? I know movie theaters are opening back up, and I know around New York City, some of the shows are completely selling out because people are so glad to be back in a movie theater, right?
Right.
But there's still a lot of content being created for just streaming only. So
yeah,
what's that going to look like?
Well, I think connected TV and streaming services in general, which of course were growing tremendously pre-COVID, I think those have fundamentally changed the entertainment world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to continue. So every large entertainment company, Disney, Viacom, CBS, on and on, are focused on streaming services now. It's more of a subscription or membership model. It's become the core of their business. And I think partly because of that, you're seeing subscriptions and memberships, which, when we started this at the Wall Street Journal digitally, people thought we were nuts. That is now becoming very well established and accepted of how people connect with content, whether it's television, filmed entertainment, or reading content, or music, of course, which has shifted tremendously from buying recorded music to streaming music. And the same goes with so many other areas of information.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has become a very well established thing that consumers and businesses are very comfortable subscribing to and paying for. Now, live experiences, absolutely. I think top Broadway shows are still going to be a very tough ticket. Live sporting events, very tough ticket. I think the digital opportunities are going to be a big add-on to those.
Yeah, very, very good. Yeah. Well, for students who want to get in the industry, let me just ask a little bit more about that. Are there any particular classes they should focus on? I mean, particular skills other than the basic ones, accounting, HR, that you mentioned earlier, to really differentiate themselves when they come out of this brave new world?
Yeah. So, I think all those fundamental business areas are, certainly very important. Some of the areas that are clearly going to be big growth areas for this exposure would be anything related to data and artificial intelligence. Oh, I don't know if I lost my mic here. Hopefully you've heard everything we've been talking about until that. Yeah, so I would say everything related to data and AI is going to be very important. So skills in those areas, technology in general, but those specifically I think would be very valuable and very powerful. I think marketing is very important. What's interesting is, I was talking about traditional advertising. I think traditional advertising is in secular decline. All the growth, digital advertising is enormous. It's completely dominated by two companies, Google and Facebook. The rest of the industry is kind of fighting for everything else. But even though advertising is in this decline, marketing is in a renaissance. There are all kinds of new ways companies are trying to connect with audiences. If you're a business company, information company, it's gotten harder to connect with your audiences. People aren't consuming the same media they used to. It's hard to reach people by email because everyone's drowning in email. Things like direct mail and all these other ways people used to connect with customers are now much, much harder or not really a vehicle. So marketing and the connection between marketing and digital media, social media, new ways of reaching audiences with content or marketing messages, I think that's a really important growth area that I think would be something students would be, who are interested in that, would really get a lot of benefit from learning more about that.
You mentioned about Google and Facebook dominating that area. Are there any opportunities for new companies to come in? Like if somebody had a great business idea, is there any chance they could compete with Google's and Facebook's a little?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that's been amazing to me is there are so many new, big, and growing businesses that are emerging all the time. So, just some examples the past couple of years of businesses that have become really important. You may have heard of Substack, which is creating a subscription model around content and newsletters and journalism that you can subscribe to. Some of it's free. It's becoming very significant. Clubhouse, which is more of an audio, social content business, becoming very important and significant. There are some other businesses I think are fascinating that have kind of sprung from nowhere, but are digital offerings. One of the very high growth areas has been financial information and investing tools and information. There's a company called Benzinga, which has become a huge player with very high quality content and journalism that people subscribe to help them invest in the stock market and elsewhere. Kind of sprung up from nowhere. It's now a very significant growth business. So there are so many new companies that are forming all the time in this space. The other a couple of other examples that are close to my heart, this is a little more on the business information side. A lot of top journalists from places like the Wall Street Journal and other traditional content businesses have formed their own content businesses in more specialized verticals. So a couple of examples, there's a business called The Information, which is a very high quality subscription business for technology content. You pay a few $100s a year. You get really inside information about what's going on in the tech world. There's a company called Stat that does the same kind of thing, more on the pharmaceutical and healthcare business. Companies are subscribing to this content. All these last 6 or 7 businesses I mentioned barely existed a few years ago. So these are entrepreneurs, sometimes with venture capitalists, that are creating new things based on really understanding what customers need and what digital allows you to do that may have been pretty hard a few years ago.
Well, I'm going to hope that someone in this room is going to create the next business. So you'll mention the next time you'll do this.
Please.
We'd like to give the students in the audience now a chance to ask questions. Microphones will be passed around. If you have a question, please raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you. Question for Mr. Schulman? Okay, sure.
It's always hard to ask the first question.
That's right.
Usually after the first question.
That's right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Your bio says that you're working with BCG's people in the organization practice. Can you tell us more about what that is?
Yeah, so BCG is Boston Consulting Group, one of the top management consulting firms in the world. And I've been aligned with them for a couple of years as a senior advisor working with clients in this kind of tech and information space. the work I've started doing with them in the people and organization practice is more on the executive coaching and executive advisory side. So BCG has created this new practice that recognizes a lot of executives at their clients can use a sounding board, can use some help working through some of the big transformation challenges or business issues that they're dealing with. So it's a business that helps them be successful and helps facilitate for them, different options in their business in terms of how they manage their functions or role. So it's that kind of part of the business.
Just raise your hand if you have a question. Over here. Oh, hey, we're going to bring the microphone to you so everybody can hear. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Schulman. So thank you, first off. So what are the most important attributes of a successful leader? And what are some of the attributes or qualities that you notice that leaders right now are lacking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in terms of attributes, I think if you're leading a business or a part of a business or a function of a business, some of the things that are really important are people skills and communication skills. So, I think, a big part of getting a business culture in the right place and getting the team excited about a growth strategy is making sure everyone's on the same page. So I used to put a lot of focus on internal communication, doing internal town halls, newsletters, other ways of sharing information about the strategy, what we're doing, making sure we're getting input from the team about what we're doing and what customers are focused on. So, so I would say, communication, people skills, really important. I think, I would say analytical ability, which doesn't always mean crunching numbers, but it means getting access to facts and data and information to help make decisions and to think creatively about opportunities based on that information, I think is a really important skill. In terms of the second part of your question, I think was, what do I see lacking or what's lacking? I think for a lot of businesses, what they sometimes lack is to really focus on their customers' pain points and needs. I think a lot of companies, the natural inclination sometimes is to think, oh, we've got this great product or this great solution or this great technology, let's go market it to the customers. I think it's important to turn that around and really start with what is the customer trying to do? If it's a business customer, what are they trying to do to make money, mitigate risk, or save money, or whatever they're trying to accomplish? Really understanding that. And one of the things we talk about in the business information space is workflow. How does work happen in these companies? How can we help make it better, easier, better decisions? And that only comes from really digging in and spending time with customers and asking them, and sometimes surveying them and asking the sales force, what are customers looking for? And I think on the consumer side of things, it's similar. It's really focusing on what customers want to do, what do they enjoy doing, what are they interested in, and trying to create products around that.
Thank you.
So a follow-up to that, having had such a successful career, how do you continue to develop yourself as a leader?
Yeah, so one of the things I'm always doing, I'm always trying to learn new things. So what I'm the way my career has evolved, at the moment, I'm much more focused on this advisory, coaching, consulting, board kind of role. But a lot of that for me is because I want to learn new things and get exposed to new types of businesses, new types of content that I may not know as much about, because it keeps me engaged, it keeps me interested, but it also, I think, keeps me current and learning about new things. Two of the advisory companies I work with are very small, and I just work directly with the founders and the CEOs, and I'm doing it because I think it's interesting, and I think what they're doing is interesting, and there's opportunity to do it. So, you know, when I make decisions, or even some of the business leadership roles I've had, a lot of what gets me interested, if it's new, different, and where I think I would enjoy helping to find some new ways of running the business. So, you know, for me, it's always about learning and exploring and trying to get exposed to some interesting new things.
Thank you. Yes, sir, right here in the front.
Thank you for your amazing presentation, but I was wondering in specific, what is your favorite part of the information and media industry?
What's my favorite part? Well, you know, let me say, as a consumer and maybe as a business person, you know, as a consumer, I still love newspapers and news. So I'm very focused, you know, I subscribe to Wall Street Journal and New York Times, digital and print for both. I am, you know, focused, I just am very interested in what's going on in the world, and I've always been interested in that. You know, back in college, I was, you know, every day would make sure I was reading a newspaper. So I just find that very interesting. I'm also very into music. So I'm a subscription streamer. And, you know, I like, you know, all the streaming television, you know, a lot of shows. So, you know, and personally much more interested in a lot of the streaming shows than what's going on in the movie theaters. But, you know, very interested in all of that. As a business person, you know, I am, you know, very interested in a lot of these new subscription types of services that people are doing digitally around content, subscriptions and memberships. And on the business information side, I've been spending a lot of time lately in some new business solutions for companies, which are, you know, really about data and analytics that help companies make decisions about important parts of their business, and including some growing needs in the world. So, you know, those are just some things that I'm interested in right now.
Thank you. But as a follow-up question, I was wondering, what are some key takeaways of your success stories? So like, what has helped you, and what are some things you would tell yourself as a college student back in your day, I would say?
Yeah, so I'd say in terms of key takeaways, you know, from running some of these businesses, there's been some, you know, common themes, I would say, which is really around growth strategy. And by the way, you know, one of the books that had a big impact on me, even though it's been written a couple decades ago, that I thought, you know, as a college student, or maybe I read it during business school, was really important, is a book called Competitive Strategy by Michael Porter. You know, it's kind of a classic in business strategy, but I remember when I read it, it pulled together for me. It's basically a whole framework for what makes a business successful and why some businesses are a lot more profitable than others. So it's all about strategy. And I just felt that was fascinating, and strategy was really interesting. And I'd recommend that book, but it's also, you know, it got me very focused on, you know, just thinking about different parts of this information world and which ones would grow and why, and which ones would be challenged and why, and what some of the drivers of all that are. So that's in a way, that's kind of been the focus of my career, is dealing with businesses that are sometimes facing all kinds of change and disruption, mostly because of technology, and then thinking about new approaches. What can we do about it? We could either get depressed and watch the business shrivel up, or maybe get creative and do some new things and launch some new products and services. So that's kind of the mindset I've always tried to focus on for the businesses I've led, as well as in my advisory roles. Mm-hmm. Yep, there's one in the back there. Sure, I would get the mic back there.
First, I'd like to thank you for hosting this talk.
Sure.
My question is, as we know, many companies are currently struggling with supply chain issues across the globe, and I'd like to know what new tech components you feel they might implement to combat these issues, and would they be sustainable?
Sorry, the second part of the question was what new
tech components do you feel they might implement to combat these issues?
Yeah, no, so supply chain's a great example of, and there's a whole bunch of big global issues, supply chain, climate change and sustainability, a whole bunch of big issues like that, where information, the kinds of things I've been talking about, can play a really important role. One of the businesses I led, called Factiva, was a tech and content product, and one of the things it helped with was supply chain, because it gave you a lot of information from local markets all over the world that could talk about trends, changes, problems related to your supply chain. So if you're a company and you're accessing, you have a factory in Africa or wherever, you can zero in, get a lot of information and news about what's going on there related to some of the suppliers or what's going on at the ports nearby or so forth. So it really is all about content, data, and then some technology like AI, which is really just about predicting what might happen based on that data. And a lot of companies they're scrambling to get more direct insight and information about that. And one of the companies I'm involved with now is supply chain isn't the only thing it's about, but it is about understanding some of the risks, some of the geopolitical things going on in local markets around the world, and then gathering some data related to things happening in that market. And supply chain is one of the areas where that can be very helpful, because it can point to some hot points, flash points, things that are happening, problems that are happening that could disrupt the supply chain. So it's a good way to end the session, because information, it's not just about enjoying a TV show or listening to music. It's about content, tools, technology that helps with some really big global problems. And I think that's part of what makes it really exciting.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that we've run out of time, but we have. I want to thank Mr. Schulman for being here with us today. And as a small token of our appreciation for his visit, we have something for you.
Thank you so much.
Have some Lubin swag, as we call it here.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's great. Enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thanks for all the great questions.
Yep. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.